Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started. About for a great start, great speakers on a really very topical subject, which is retention in care. As you all know, this is a very important step, the third 90 of UNAIDS, retention, adherence, and viral suppression. So I think we have a variety of topic to try to address this, and my name is Jean Mashega. I am associate professor at University of Pittsburgh, but also based in South Africa at Stellenbosch. And my co-chair will introduce himself. You want to come to? Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Gabe Rashami. I'm a doctor based at UCSF, so University of California, San Francisco.
So we decided, we have quite plenty of time, so we're going to try to have each speaker go ahead, and then after the talk, we're going to have a question and so on. So this is, if we still have some time left, we can go ahead with more discussion later. So it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker. So this is Lina Hadna from TET Mozambique. She worked for Médecins Sans Frontières, and she's been, as you know, Médecins Sans Frontières has been doing great work in terms of retention in care at the community level there. And the talk is going to be retention and viral load uptake in TET Mozambique. So it's great to see all the follow-up of Dr. De Croo group there in Mozambique. Lily, you want to come?
So I just pushed the... Good afternoon. After 10 years of implementing community-based care in TET Mozambique, I am very pleased to be here today to share you the preliminary results of viral load uptake and retention in care among community-based care members. The work is still in progress for broader and in-depth analysis, but this is what we have by now. As for now, no other study has been done assessing 10-year attrition in patient-led ART delivery model. The aim of the study was to estimate long-term retention in community ART groups and predictors of attrition, including viral load, baseline CD4s, WHO clinical stage, and being on TB treatment. MSF has been supporting the health authorities in Tete province, Mozambique, since 2001. The provision of ART began in 2002 in the provincial hospital of Tete and was then decentralized to peripheral health centers in 2006. As the concerns about high rates to loss to follow-up prompted MSF to launch a pilot program in community ART groups, GAGs. These are peer support groups involved in community ART distribution and mutual psychosocial support. As first results showed excellent long-term retention, GAG was approved as a national policy in the whole Mozambique. MSF continued supporting the health authorities in Tete. So, what is GAG? Stable patients, meaning that they have been on ART for at least 6 months, their CD4 is above 200, their viral load below 1,000, are advised to form a group of 3 to 6 members, elect a leader, focal point, and to come to a nearby health clinic where their eligibility to become a group is assessed. When they're eligible to become a group, on a turn-based rotativity, the group representative goes to the clinic, has a clinical consultation, relates to any important issues happen through him, herself, or the other group members, collects the ART for the whole group, returns to the community, distributes the ART to the whole group. 1 month later, another representative from the same group goes to the clinic and the same thing happens. Lay counselors also play an important role in the GAG dynamic because they provide training on approaches, roles, and responsibilities of the members. Also, they are helping to monitor the adherence of members on a monthly basis. We conducted this study on routine program data from HIV electronic registry. We included 2,167 patients from 13 clinics in the province of Tete. Logistic regression was used to estimate the association between individual level variables and 2 different attritions, leaving HIV care and leaving GAG care. Group rotation was only analyzed among groups who were active at the data extraction moment. So, among patients who had a viral load result ever monitored, 70% of them had it suppressed. However, 487 patients did not have suppressed viral load, and among them, only 9.5% returned to individual care. As I already said, we were only able to analyze the group rotation among active groups in the end of the analysis period. Among them, 78.5% had a fluent rotation representation at the clinic, meaning that the group was rotating in a way described before, that every month a new member is coming, not that some members only stay at home and the other ones go for them. Median group size was 3 people, but the groups varied from 2 members to 8 members. When we look at the retention, we can see that the GAG members retention, meaning that the patients stayed in care but not necessarily in GAG, was found very high, 93% at 2 years, 90% at 4 and 6 years, and 87.5% at 9 years. Similarly, high results were also found in staying in GAG care, meaning the patient retained in the group. As you can see on this graph, the associations analyzed, most of them were associated with attrition from HIV care, with viral load not done and high viral load being the most significantly associated. Also, 15% of all patients joined GAG with CD4 below 200. These patients were also at higher risk of becoming lost to follow-up or dying. We also looked at the other type of attrition, where similar results were obtained in all the factors analyzed as viral load being associated, as in the previous slide. Long-term retention was found exceptionally high. This might suggest that retention during the first years is likely to determine also the long-term retention in care. This is the time when it's important to monitor the viral load, to familiarize the patient with treatment, and also build adherence. However, the cause and consequence could be debated when we are looking at the factors associated, especially when we look at viral load. Defaulters, of course, have lesser possibilities of viral load to be monitored. 75% of patients had a viral load result ever, so meaning there is actually 24.3% of patients who might be in virological failure with no viral load monitored, and could therefore be needing individual care or eventually a switch to second-line treatment. Also, in order to improve the positive impact of GAG to patient outcomes, the exclusion criteria from GAG should be used more than it has until now. Patients with low CD4 were found in the groups where these conditions need a lot more frequent follow-up than the GAG rotativity of 1 visit per 6 months. To wrap it up, a few key challenges and benefits of the GAG model. As I said already before, only 9.5% of the patients with unsuppressed viral load returned to individual care. This happens mostly due to the clinicians do not want to switch patients back to individual care if the patient themselves wants to stay. Instead, they're provided counseling to increase the adherence and through that also suppress viral load. In reality, we don't know if the viral load is suppressed because most of the patients only have one viral load monitored. Also, GAG should consist of 3 to 6 members. In reality, we had groups of 2, we had groups of 8. The groups of 2 mainly were consisting of cohabiting couple, and their rotation to the clinic was also found to be worse than in the bigger groups, 3 and 4 people groups. Also, GAG is not an only model. It does not fit the needs of all patients. For many patients, individual care is a solution because their medical conditions, their socio-geographical situation, or their psychological preferences, for example, to disclose their status to as many little people as possible. Therefore, our aim should never be to include everybody in the groups. Some benefits of the model as well. GAG members act as peer educators to each other. Together, they exchange and gain knowledge about their health. They conduct pill counts, control and advise each other on the pill intake, and also encourage each other to respect the code of conduct. In that sense, some of the very essential functions of ART treatment are shifted away from the clinics to the community level, where GAG groups and patients in those groups act as HIV service satellites in the community. Also, GAG members have been a crucial intervention entry point for a patient empowerment project called JAM, in English Stop Stockouts, where patients are encouraged to call a free phone line to report when they did not receive their medicine from the clinic. Being in GAG represents a way to decrease the financial and socio-economical cost of the treatment. Patients simply does not need to travel and queue in the clinic every month like they had to do before. Instead, they do it only once in 6 months. We had some missing data on clinical variables in viral load, CD4, also some inconsistencies on the date of ART and GAG start and exit. As already said before, group-level characteristics were only available for active groups, meaning that we did not have a possibility to analyze the group rotation effects on people who have already left the groups, as well as generalizability of an NGO, a long-time NGO-supported health facility outcomes could be a limitation. In conclusion, we can say that this model has very quickly proved its value in bringing in very high retention rates, but more work has to be done in the clinical management of the disease, because for now we have patients with unsuppressed viral load and also viral load not monitored in the groups. Patients should also be enrolled in ART earlier in order to join the GAG groups with less depressed immunological status. GAG model as a peer-to-peer support and not only as a community provision of ART leads to high retention. Whether it also leads to long-term suppression still needs to be asserted. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lina. So the paper is open for discussion. So when you want to ask a question, come to the mic, introduce yourself, and then ask the question. Try to keep it brief, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Nelson. I would like to know what was the suppression rate for those patients that were suppressed. Then what strategies did you have for the non-suppressed in order to ensure that they can have a suppression rate?
The suppression rate was 70% of the patients had the suppressed viral load value and 30% didn't. Was that the question?
Yes, I wanted to know what was the overall suppression rate for those that were suppressed, the 79%. What was their suppression rate, viral load?
Do you mean percent suppressed among retained? Is that the question?
I don't think I understood the question. The ones who were retained, I think I don't have this data at the moment.
Could you come to clarify your question?
Okay, she told us in her presentation that they had 79% of the patients, their viral load was suppressed. But what was the suppression rate, the percentage? What is it? We can have 100 patients, 30 are not suppressed, 30%, and 7 are suppressed. But what is the suppression rate?
I think we can talk about this later.
Yeah. Next question.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm Anne from Uganda. Do you have an idea of the retention rates for patients in care for sites, other sites that did not have the CAG model, so that we just have an idea to compare?
Yes, we do have. For this analysis, we intentionally did not compare to other care types, to the individual care, because we assume that the patients in individual care are different than the ones in GAG. So we don't want to bring in the comparison now. But yes, I have them, and I can show them to you if you want later.
Okay, thank you.
But Lina, do you have any kind of historical standard of care, virological suppression, or whatever in the setting in terms of clinic-based virological suppression rates?
Yes, the viral load suppression for the whole cohort, sort of what we have this included 2,000 patients, the whole cohort. What we're working with is a 10,000 patient cohort where we have a viral suppression on approximately 61, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Vivek Jain from UCSF. Thanks for a great presentation. 2 quick questions. What do you do when a patient who is meant to come and pick up drugs for 5 other people defaults and does not show up, and putting the ART at risk for all 6 people? And then second question, does your model allow for something that if person number 1 has a viral load that's detectable, can that person be called back out of sequence sooner to come back rather than coming in the exact intended sequence so that their unsuppressed viral load can be acted upon sooner?
So, yes, the lay counselors are the ones who, if there is a patient who clearly is not contributing to the dynamic, I don't want to go, or making other people go to the clinic while he or she is staying at home, this patient is provided counseling by the lay counselor, and also eventually groups also divide. Sometimes there is a group of 6 people, maybe there is somebody who is not cooperating, then some groups divide into 2, maybe 4, 3 and 3. So, and the other question about viral, if somebody has a high viral load, also this is also upon the lay counselors who go back to the community to trace this patient to come in earlier. But of course, cannot be asserted all the times that this patient will be attending the clinic earlier.
Okay, we're going to take the last question and then we move on.
Thank you for the presentation. My name is Nathaniel Lohman from USAID in Mozambique. And my question is, it's beyond the scope of your analysis directly, but as far as implications for differentiated models of retaining patients, I think you highlight the group support aspect of CAGs, and I'm wondering if you care to speculate on kind of the relative importance of that versus less frequent and decongested clinic visits for ART pickup, particularly as 3-month drug distribution and rapid flow have the potential being scaled up in Mozambique as well. Thanks.
Yes, the problem with Tete province is that we don't have this other. I know they are available in Mozambique, but they are not available in the districts we work. So in a way, this is the individual care, GAG, and pregnant women and children have also options, but there is not really an option for a sort of regular adult patient. So I hope in the future we can see that also in the rural provinces in Mozambique.
Thank you, Lina. So we move on. Our next talk is going to be Musa Manganye. Actually, he's from South Africa, from the Palliative Care Association of South Africa, and he's going to talk about increased retention in care through community systems strengthening lesson learned from Cairns District in South Africa. Musa?
Thank you, Chairperson. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's quite an absolute honor to be given an opportunity to share the experience following the rotation of patients in care using the community system strengthening. We are delighted to actually showcase what we managed to do over the period of 2 years to date. Well, it is very crystal to everyone that the burden of disease within the country, in particular South Africa, is very high, especially with estimated 7.1 million people living with HIV. Of course, the patients have been put on treatment, over 4.4 million on treatment, but the country has embarked on the massive rollout of the treatment, especially with the 2 million people that needs to be put on treatment in the next 2 years. That on its own is going to create a lot of congestion to the health facilities, and that is why our project have been involved in particular to support the country in terms of decongesting the facilities into establishing the community adherence labs to ensure that at the end patients are retained in care in particular. So in 2016, South Africa has launched the adherence guideline for HIV, TB, and non-communicable disease. And part of this was really to ensure that the patients are retained in care, but most importantly, to make sure that they create an avenue to ensure that there is some differentiated care service delivery model, especially the community adherence labs, to ensure that at the end, patients are those that are very stable on treatment, do not stay in long queues, but continue to access their continual medication and care at the level in which it is going to ease them to not to stay longer in queues within the health facilities. So in a quest to really implement the adherence guideline, the care and support for improved patients' outcome, which is CASIPO, implemented by the Hospice Palliative Care Association of South Africa, along with the FHI 360 in South Africa, project funded through by the USAID in South Africa, had embarked on building the capacity of the individuals, especially the organization in the form of the community-based organizations, the ward-based primary care outreach teams, along with the health facility personnel, to ensure that the decongestion of the facilities are done in a more amicable way, and most importantly, to make sure that patients are not lost into follow-up. Hence, the whole process, which is of course informed by the prescripts under the guidance of the adherence guideline, had made sure that there's a proper cohorting of the patients to ensure that they are moved into community adherence labs. But what is also critical is that it fosters on the patient-centered approach, where the patient has to opt to be in a lab, because that on its own leverage on the accountability of the patients over their care, and to also ensure that they stay in care from the very modalities that they would have chosen. And part of the whole range of the package within the community adherence labs also involves the universal care interventions to make sure that patients are continually screened for issues such as STI, TBs, and nutrition upon their attendance to the adherence labs, and to make sure that those that get to be lost are tracked and reintegrated back into the mainstream. So the project has been implemented in 15 districts of the 27 PEPFAR priority districts in South Africa. And how we had implemented the project involved a branded approach in terms of providing the technical assistance, especially in terms of making sure that the very structures that I spoke to, the community-based organizations, the ward boards, as well as the health, the personnel within the health facilities, are provided for with the training. There's ongoing mentorship and support to make sure that the fidelity of the interventions are not compromised, and most importantly, to deliver the quality care and support services, and enhancing the skills of the cadres that are involved in terms of the establishment of the adherence labs. But most importantly, upon the very recruitment, is to ensure that the proper cohorting is done, because that on its own yield some of the positive outcome that I will share with you at a later stage, and of course the facilitation of the very adherence labs, making sure that the information and continual education and counseling are provided for to the clients that are on treatment. As I've indicated, the universal care intervention to make sure there's ongoing screening done to make sure that the patients are receiving the comprehensive care and support services that they require. But also what is important is to ensure that we keep the quality of the health information, or the records in particular, because these are the labs that are run at a community level, and we've got to make sure that there's an interface built between the movement of the patients and ongoing care of the patients, to make sure that patients are accounted for at the health facilities which they are linked to. So just a brief in terms of how these labs are run. It's very much stepwise approach, but very quickly to ensure that the patients do not stay long within the adherence lab session. It takes about 45 to 60 minutes for patients to come and attend the session. So upon their arrival, normally they would have their appointment cards. They would need to, of course, brought into the adherence lab facilitator. Once they've gathered, we have about 15 to 30, but what the prescripts are saying is that each lab should contain about 30 patients. So, of course, not all the labs could have the maximum of the 30 patients. And as a result, make sure that the minimum number that is actually agreed upon from various contexts from which the labs are run would make sure that that number has been actually established as part of the cohort. And then there's always health education that needs to be provided for, and then screening gets done. The patients are then handed over their prepacked medication. So those that would have been screened and warrant some needs for the further referral, of course, the referral forms will be completed, and then they will be linked into a specific facility where they will receive such care. And then within a very short while, then they will leave the club, of course, with the return date that would have been provided for. So what have we learned and what have we found in terms of the implementation of the project? Overall, from the 15 districts, we managed to decant 141,000 patients into community adherence labs. And of this number, 134 are still within the attendance of the adherence labs, of course, on the subsequent sessions that they are due to. So it's only about 7,000 patients that have exited the club. I'll talk to you briefly about where have they gone to upon their exit to the clubs. So we have, of course, about 95% of the retention following the cohort that has been established since 2016 to date. The 7,000 that have exited the clubs, the high proportion of it, 53%, had actually a transfer out. This also span from the fact that I indicated that this is a choice that a patient will need to have when they opt to be in a club. And given the fact that the various modalities that are available, such as the external pickup points, a patient can simply decide to go and attend the external pickup points and no longer wish to be in a club, or rather had to opt to go back to the facilities where a space and fast lane appointment option is given to them, so that they do not actually have to stay longer in queues whenever they're due for their appointments. So those are kind of the the transfer out that they had actually happened. But unfortunately, there were those that they had been lost in follow-up, only 11% of the 7,000, and then we had just 1% of those who unfortunately had passed on and may their soul rest in peace. And then, of course, there are those that were unstable and had to be reintegrated, linked back to a care in particular. So what we also learned upon the club's facilitation is that this also increases the rate of the viral load completion. We are seeing for example, in some of the facilities that had a very low facility, a viral load completion rate. But upon their cohort and attendance to the clubs, they've been actually increasing, as you could see on a slide. So what also has been a greatest lesson from the implementation of the community systems strengthening is that the community structures alone cannot function and be sustainable without the integration of the bigger health system. And as a result, this calls for an integrated approach to ensure that upon the establishment of these labs, the patients still need to belong to their facilities that they are linked to. So as a result, there are services that need to be provided, which needs to be in a more integrated way. So in other words, the community systems cannot function without the bigger health system as such. So given the fact that we had implemented various modalities to ensure that the clubs are established, there is, of course, the ones that we had seen to be more sustainable and the one that would, of course, be scalable. And in this result, we found that the CBOs that are funded also has an ideal opportunity to continue running through the clubs, because these are the community structures where the patients belong, and they also have a lot of confidence to ensure that they continue to get their medication and receive their care at the community structures where they belong. But most importantly, because the country has launched the WOBOT policy framework, this was one of the ideal model that has been seen to be sustainable, because it's government-led and it's government-owned. So it will be, of course, sustained, given the fact that there's a lot of investment that is put on it. But at the same time, on the very same modality, the role clarification is key, because this is what we have seen, that if the cadres play their critical role in running through the clubs, there's a proper facilitation and patients are seen to be retained, as we had seen from the retention rate that we had shown. And one other critical part is that with the ownership of the community structures, patients are able to be sustained. And this is a typical example of one of the province, a rural province, where there was no availability of the community halls, nor churches that could actually run through the class. But a community health worker had to offer a homestay to make sure that at the end of the day, the patients are retained. And this has also shown a lot of interest from the club members as well to ensure that they continue to really stay in care. Just to show some of the quotation that the patients had that fosters the quality of the community adherence clubs. It's one example where a patient quoted, I quote, I actually didn't believe that when I attended the first club session that my experience is going to be the same on the second one and many to come. It is unusual for us in a clinic to arrive at 7:30 and to be done on the way to work at 8:30. Or before that. When it happened again, this time, the second club visit, I knew that this is real. I will make sure that now I keep up on my appointment, as I do not have to sit here for 3 hours or more. I do not even need a clinic letter for the appointment, as I now get to work within a reasonable time, and my employer was surprised that I was early within my club visit, and I usually late at work for when it is my clinic day. I am really grateful for the people who through that brought about this, but also to those that have been helping through the club visit. You guys have been friendly and encouraging, and that also shows the level of, the satisfaction from the patients. And the last one, because the reality is that patients have got the fatigue at some point when they are on treatment. So one of the quotation from the patient was that initially I was not keen to be in an adherence club, but as time went by, I started to enjoy the groups because now it is not only easier and quicker for me to access the medication. I'm meeting other people, and we are able to share experience and offload with each other. We go through the depression sometimes, and groups have helped us to offload. I wish we can learn more about HIV and mental illness, especially for those who, of us who have been taking treatment for long. And sometimes I feel tired to continue. Close quote. So in conclusion, given the fact that the country has given an opportunity to the project to implement the multiple modalities in terms of establishing the adherence clubs, the reality is that there are those that are sustainable and scalable, and these are the ones that would have to appeal to the department to make sure that the patients do not go back to the facility because they do not want to. And at the same time, the strengthening the community system and facilitating the linkages between the community and the facilities has been proven to be critical in promoting the retention in care. I give thanks to the funder, especially USAID. Thank you.
So we run out of time so we may have just one question, otherwise we'll move on, and I'm going to pass the moderation to my co-chair.
Yes, microphone 4.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Catherine Brokenshire Scott, and I'd like to congratulate you on your success on the adherence clubs. It's a great accomplishment. I have a question about linking other services to that, the viral load testing, point of care, and any index testing that you're doing with the group members in their club.
Can you please come again?
I'd like to ask how the viral loads are done within the groups, and also do you do any index testing from the club members?
Okay. Thank you for your question. Well, what we normally do is that the cohorts are done within each and every group to make sure that they are due for the blood collection at the same time. So the facilitator will remind the patients when they are due that they need to go to the facility at the date when they need to return so that their bloods are collected. So the index testing, unfortunately, it is not done. It's only, we're fostering only on the viral load completion.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. Dr. Adeodatta Kechikinwa is an experienced pediatrician with over 20 years of clinical research experience in pediatric HIV and AIDS care. She currently is based at the Children's Clinical Center of Excellence at Malago Hospital in Kampala, Uganda. And it's my pleasure to have her speak on her talk, Same-Day ART Initiation Does Not Reduce 12-Month Retention Among HIV-Infected Children in Uganda. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope they can reduce. There's a lot of echo. There's a lot of echo that you want. I wonder whether you can actually see here.
Hold up the
yeah, yeah,
floor, so that's good. Here.
All right. Good afternoon. I'm going to present to you same-day ART initiation does not reduce 12-month retention among HIV-infected children in Uganda. And I want to begin by thanking the co-authors and the investigators on this. I have no conflict. So in 2015, WHO recommended ART should be initiated in all children and adolescents living with HIV, regardless of WHO clinical stage or CD4 cell count. Uganda has implemented test and treat guidelines for children, which included same-day initiation since 2014. However, there was limited guidance on how soon after diagnosis ART should be initiated without jeopardizing retention. This study provides a unique opportunity to examine the impact of same-day initiation on 12-month retention in the children. So we set to compare 12-month probability of retention in HIV-infected children less than 15 years initiated on ART on the same day of diagnosis versus 2 to 14 days or more than 14 days from the date of diagnosis. This map shows you where the study was done. This was a retrospective cohort study. We set out to study 42 health facilities in Uganda. Uganda's health system has both the central, regional, general, and health centers. This study excluded the center because the center is heavily covered by so-called centers of excellence, and we thought they could bias the results. 13 regional hospitals covering the whole country were studied, general hospitals 13, and health centers. The study population, as you've heard, were children less than 15 years, and we studied those children who were initiated on ART between June 2014 and March 2015 after complete rollout of the test and treat guidelines. We purposefully sampled 42 health facilities because these were the health facilities that contributed 80% of the children, excluding the centers of excellence. Data was abstracted from patient charts or existing charts of children in care were included. The independent variable included time from HIV diagnosis to ART initiation, as described below, and our outcome was retention, which was either you are alive on ART at the site, and we excluded those who were dead, you are not lost to follow-up, or you had not been transferred out. So 899 charts were abstracted. Unfortunately, 115 were dropped from analysis because of missing date of diagnosis. We summarized baseline characteristics using proportions and median for categorical and continuous variables. We used Kaplan-Meier estimates to compute the 12-month probability of retention and log-rank tests to compare groups. We stratified by time from diagnosis to ART initiation, as previously said, either on the same day or 2 days to 14, or those that appeared after 14 days. In terms of results, here I describe the baseline characteristics. A number of the children below, total we had between 2 and 2 to 4 years, we had close to 50%. We had a total of 784 children, and across the different categories of starting, there was no difference in terms of age at diagnosis. There was no difference in terms of whether you are male or female. There was a difference in terms of whether you were started at a regional referral or not, because the regional referral hospitals started more children. The median CD4 count, there was no difference between these children in the different age groups, with an interquartile range of 304 to 983. And there was no difference whether these children had been found to have TB at diagnosis or not. In total, of the 784 children studied, 91% were still in care. 2% had died, and 7% were lost to follow-up. In terms of 12-month retention stratified by age at ART, looking at this Kaplan-Meier, there was no difference between those children who were started on the same day, those who went home and came back within 2 to 14 days, and those who came back after 14 days. As you can see, the confidence interval basically are all the same between the two different groups and do not cross on the other side. Again, we looked at the level of health facility. You're looking at the 95% confidence interval by health facility. And there was no difference in terms of retention between the referral hospitals, the general hospitals, and the health center force. In terms of age at ART diagnosis, again, we find there was no difference between those under 2 to 4 years, and 5 to 14. But I hasten to add that those children where we found they were lost to follow-up, majority were from the under 2 age group. So in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, starting ART in children on the same day of diagnosis does not reduce 12-month retention among HIV-infected children initiated on treatment. Our findings, therefore, support the inclusion of children in the 2016 WHO Test and Treat guidance with confidence. While 91% 12-month retention is very promising, we suggest further evaluation to determine the reasons for attrition to ensure universal treatment for all children. We do recommend improved data quality through on-site mentorships and use of standard operating procedures, making data use at site as a culture so that the health workers may realize their own gaps and own it as they use it. We emphasize supervision on site monthly data validation if we are going to use program data for outcomes. I wish to acknowledge all the children, their caregivers, whose data we use in this study. We want to thank CDC and PEPFAR for their financial and technical support because this study was funded through the CDC grant. And we are very grateful to the Ministry of Health that gave us a chance to study the whole region, the district health team, and all the health facility staff that helped in abstraction of this data. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The speaker is open to questions. Microphone 4. And please introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi. I'm Jimmy Carlucci with Pediatric Infectious Diseases at Vanderbilt University in the United States, formerly with Baylor Lesotho in 2013-14. I have a question regarding disclosure of HIV status. I don't see that was accounted for in the analysis, but I'm wondering what the standard is in terms of disclosure and what age that might happen at in Uganda, and whether or not you think there might be differences in retention based on disclosure status. Because I would imagine that those adolescents who are both initiating antiretrovirals and who are struggling with a new disclosed HIV diagnosis may have additional challenges.
Thank you very much for the question. Disclosure was not looked to in this study, but I can use, in another parallel study. We note that the mothers of the infants are the younger ones, when especially it's the first parent and the child is less than 2 years, we find that there is a bigger problem of disclosure, more than even the adolescents. So, and for adolescents or for children, we start a disclosure process at 8 years, and we expect that the child or the adolescent should be fully disclosed between 10 and 12 years.
Other questions? If I may add a question, which is, as an adult, forgive me, as an adult doctor, not a pediatrician, just the hypothesis that the same-day ART might decrease retention that prompted this observation. I think often in adults we think that it's the other way around. That might actually improve retention or desire to be in care. You're getting something, getting treatment. What sort of observations led to the initial hypothesis, if I may, why retention might decrease with same-day ART? Was it issues of disclosing to the child or adolescents disclosing to the family? What kind of promoted the question in the first place?
Thank you very much for that. Was the main reason. So it was hypothesized that same day does not allow the parent, neither the adolescent, to be able to take in this information and accept and to remain. It felt that you were like conniving, making them make a decision too early without fully understanding. Because in all our systems, especially the public facilities, there's very minimal counseling. And that's why we even excluded the centers of excellence where they have counselors. Yeah.
Thank you. Very last question was for me is just around the distribution of time to ART in the greater than 14-day. I was curious, is it typically within a month? What's the kind of average or the distribution greater than 14 in the greater 14-month group?
So we had a range ranging from 14 days to even 3 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great, so it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, and this is Boitumelo Morapedi. He's a social worker by profession and a postgraduate diploma in monitoring evaluations and an MSc in project management. She currently works with FHI 360, APC project in Botswana, as a senior technical officer for HIV care and treatment. And her talk will be Community Patient Tracking by Lay Community Health Workers is an effective strategy towards the second and third 90. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Allow me to take this moment and to share with you community patient tracking by lay community health workers as a potential strategy towards the second and the third 90. I would like, first of all, to begin by acknowledging and thanking the people living with HIV that have generously participated in the FHI 360 Advancing Partners and Community project in Botswana, the lessons of which will be shared here with you today. I would like to just talk a little bit about background, about the APC project, the community patient tracing strategies for retention by community health workers, the standard of care that existed before the APC project within the health facilities that we work with, our results, the limitations, and conclusions. Botswana is located in Southern Africa. It's a middle-income country with a population of around 2.5 million. There's high prevalence of HIV, 18.5%. Botswana has one of the progressive ARV programs in the region. And in June 2016, the country introduced Treat All. Through Treat All, it was to provide ART for all citizens of Botswana, irrespective of CD4 count. In support of the initiative of the government of Botswana, including provision of ART for free for citizens, FHI 360 in Botswana started a project called Advancing Partners and Communities that is funded by PEFA through USAID. This project is implemented in 8 districts in Botswana. And its purpose is to build the capacity of communities to contribute to epidemic control. What happens through this project is that trained community health workers support health facilities to trace people living with HIV that fall into the following categories. Those that are not yet initiated on ART, but are within the infectious disease control register that is within the health facilities. Those that have missed their appointments, that is between 1 to 13 days, they have defaulted from treatment, that is more than 14 days, or are completely lost to follow-up over 90 days. The community health workers work by using a standardized tracing protocols or tools. These standard operating procedures were developed by the APC project in order to standardize how the community health workers would work across all the districts. This was the standard of care before the APC project came on board to work with the health facilities in these 8 districts. Before the community health workers came on board, the nurses traced the people living with HIV that are lost from care or those that have not yet initiated care through phone calls. That pink region that you can see there, I hope it's pink in your eyes. That's the health facility. That's a health worker. The person with the cross on the chest, that's our patient within the communities. So this is how the tracing was done through phone calls. Courtesy to the Ramotswa people, there's a small village called Ramotswa, and this is a Google map of the village of Ramotswa where we work. Now, once the community health workers through the APC project came on board, we ensured that there's a team of community health workers working together, but led by a senior community health worker stationed within the health facility. This is the health facility. So the senior community health worker is the community facility licensed person, and their duty is within the facility. The rest of the guys in the yellow are the community health workers, and their duty is to work in the community, to trace the clients in the community. So we don't expect to always see them in the facilities. This is how the tracking process happens. The nurses in the IDCC, they prepare a list of the people living with HIV that are eligible for tracing. They share this list with the senior community health worker, who will then now verify whether the contact information is sufficient to inform community tracing. Once that has been ascertained, then the senior will assign a community health worker who is stationed near where the patient lives, or just within that region to trace our client. And the successfully traced patients, they are linked to health facilities, and clients that are requiring enhanced support for linkage to care are accompanied. The community health workers will then provide feedback to facilities regarding the clients that have not been linked, such as those that are deceased or transferred out, or they have declined the services or promised to come. In a nutshell, what is important, not more about the numbers, but just to share with you what we saw. We realized that within the facility numbers that existed, it was only 46% of the clients in terms of those that were on pre-ART or were on treatment test prevention or legacy positives. Only 46% of them had enough information in their files to facilitate tracing processes by community health workers. And of those, we found 52% that we managed to link back to care. As you can see, the most interesting is that some of the clients were found already on treatment, although they were listed amongst those that are not yet on treatment. Some of them had transferred out of the facility. They were transferred by the same facility. It's interesting to also note that some of the clients would decline the service of community health workers. Of those that were not yet on treatment that we traced, 48% of them were females and 52% were females and 48% males. In terms of the loss to follow up, these were those that had started treatment before they had rather defaulted or they had missed their appointments. Only 61% had enough in their records to facilitate tracing processes, and we were able to link back to care 51%. As you can see the results, some of the patients would have been referred but had not yet linked at the time of writing this report. These results are for October 2016 to September 2017. Note that the clients sometimes would have been transferred out deceased or declined the services. We still also see again that more females accessed the services, agreed to link back to facilities than males. There are limitations in this data that we have shared with you overall in terms of what we found. There was no baseline data available on the rate of linkage through facility standard of care alone. Before the community health workers came on board, there was no baseline that existed within the facilities. And again, we used paper-based and electronic data. And then sometimes when you did that, we found that these parallel data collection systems, there would be data loss. It is important to mention that of all the clients that we managed to link back to care, we continued the services with community health workers by now, enrolling them into what we call community HIV care. And through that program, we provided continuous adherence support to the patient because especially those that were lost to follow up, the chances are very high that they will also sit and not go back for refills and the services. So we provide adherence counseling, more information on treat all, and give them disclosure support, do community-based screening for TB, STIs, provided information on family planning and other services. So most of the clients with the data that I shared with you, it's those that after we linked them, then we enrolled them into continuous community HIV care. In conclusion, we'll just like to say, implementation of community patient tracking contributes to linkage of people living with HIV to ART. Community health workers are critical in filling the human resource gaps within the health system. Community health workers know their communities, and this allows successful tracing of those that are even lost, sometimes by the health system. Community health workers tracing efforts also help the facilities to update facility records. The tracing of patients that have defaulted from ART or are lost from care is very resource intensive, although the outcomes are beautiful. People living with HIV that are traced in the community do not always agree to be linked back to care. Sometimes we come with excitement thinking that once I come to the house, it's just going to be sealed like that, they will link, and it doesn't always happen. I would like to acknowledge these are the partners of FHI 360 APC project working in Botswana. I'd like to acknowledge them here together with the Ministry of Health and USAID, the funder of the APC project. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We're now open for questions. Microphone 2.
Good afternoon. My name is Andre, and I'm from Los Angeles. I'm currently a retention navigator at my local clinic, and we're looking to roll out a retention program as similar as this. And I was just wondering, how long was your implementation timeline? Could you speak a little bit about that?
Okay. Just 1 year. October 2016, the results are from October 2016 to September of 2017, but the project is ongoing right now. The project is ongoing.
Thank you. Nancy.
Thanks. Nancy Payton from Berkeley. Great presentation. I have two really quick questions, and they have to do with the intensity of follow-up. So did you say that they only tried to trace people via the phone, or did they actually go into the community and try to physically find them? And similarly, with regard to the people who you found but didn't link, what kinds of efforts there were made? Because I mean, you're absolutely right. It's disappointing that only about half link. So, what was the process there?
Okay. I think I showed this little picture trying to explain what happens, that this is the joint community facility standard of care now. So it involves phone calls and home visits.
Home visits.
And home visits, yes. So the person in the yellow, that is the community health worker who repeatedly goes several visits to the household. Okay. And like I said, in our lessons, we saw that it's not always written in stone that the patient will link back to care, especially one that has stopped treatment or one that from the beginning did not want to link, which is one of the problems that we're really having. That you see, I shared lessons on those that had not yet started, they had not started treatment completely, and those that were on treatment and they stopped. So it's quite an intensive undertaking that needs more mind.
How about a comment about the data that are available at the clinic? Because you're so hampered by your ability to evaluate this given the amount of missing data.
Say that again?
I wondered if you had a comment about how to do better with data at the facility level, because you had so much your ability to evaluate it is really limited by a lot of missing data.
Yes. And I mentioned that as one of the limitations, the lack of baseline. One of the things that we are really working on moving forward is to see how we can really do this as a real quality improvement process. That with the facilities that we work with, then an aggressive baseline is determined, because most of the time the data is missing, especially on the issue of the loss to follow-up. Yeah. Before this project started really in Botswana, there was a lot of missing data everywhere. As you know, some facilities are on paper-based, some are on an electronic system, the electronic system is not integrated across the country. Yeah. So those are the gaps.
Thank you very much.
Amen.
We'll take one more question at microphone 4.
Thank you. My name is Lauren Walker. I come from ICAP at Columbia in New York. I just want to start by saying thank you for the work and the excellent presentation. I'm wondering, kind of an related question, if you identified any strategies to get better contact information from the about 50% of clients that didn't provide a sufficient phone number or address, if that exists in the community.
Okay. Please, if you permit, my question is in continuation to what she asked.
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'm Sylvia Ngwa from Cameroon. I just wanted to find out if there were any background checks done to understand why patients drop out from treatment, because with a good understanding of the reason why they dropped out from treatment, we can better come up with more appropriate strategies to reach out to them. And also very quickly, how is the issue of stigmatization addressed in this CHW approach? Thank you.
Okay, I'll talk very quickly. The issue of contact information that is missing in patient files. Now, remember that because we are a community, we are a community. And the first point of contact with the patient, that's the health worker. So the files are filled. All that information about contact is taken by the health worker at point of contact when the patient initiates on treatment, or when they enroll in the ARV program. So one of the things that we are doing with the facilities we are working with is to try really for them to aggressively, as much as you will do as much pharmacovigilance as possible, it is also very necessary that all the necessary information is taken from the patients. There's a very interesting trend that the community health workers are telling us. Sometimes you find that the phones are off air, or the phone is no longer available, or maybe the patient provided a wrong number. So like that really, that's the only advice that I will say, because at first point of contact, we are not the ones that are in contact with that patient. Regarding the background checks of white lines fall out of care, we are still sitting on a mountain of data that we have not further analyzed. The patients that I shared the numbers for are those that we now enroll them in community HIV care. There is information to the effect of why they dropped out of care. We just did not analyze it further, but we have it. I believe that next time maybe that is something that we might make a submission on. But we can share, on stigmatization. I didn't quite... It meant stigmatization from who? From the community health worker?
In the interest of time, maybe we can take that question down in the front of the podium. It's a good one,
Okay.
but around stigma. And maybe could clarify, the questioner could come down and clarify at that time. All right, we're going to keep going in the interest of time. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure to now introduce Dr. Tierney Richwood, who is an assistant professor at the Medical University of South Carolina, who uses participatory research methods to identify strategies to reduce chronic disease disparities and increase health and social equity. So, Dr. Richwood, thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to be talking today about the role of families in retaining South African adolescents living with HIV and care. I want to acknowledge my co-authors who are listed here, as well as all of the participants, especially the adolescents living with HIV and their caregivers who donate their time for this study. So as most of us are probably aware, AIDS-related illnesses are among the leading causes of death for youth worldwide. And we're specifically concerned about the mortality rate among adolescents between the ages of 13 and 24. 80% of these youth live in sub-Saharan Africa, and our study focuses on South African youth, as South Africa is most burdened than any other country in sub-Saharan Africa. In the healthcare clinics, there's been a lot more success with retaining children and adults in care, but we've really struggled with retaining youth. Often we are losing them once they make that transition from pediatric to adult care, and a lot of times they return with advanced HIV disease. So the purpose of this study was to identify social structural determinants of treatment retention and adherence among South African youth. And we were really hoping to identify potential intervention targets and strategies to improve their outcomes. We partnered with the Desmond Tutu HIV Foundation, and data were collected between May and September 2016. We conducted 59 semi-structured interviews with community stakeholders and adolescents living with HIV and their caregivers. So we asked a number of questions to get at social structural determinants, but this presentation focuses on the role of families in particular, because that was one of the most proximal influences on their treatment retention and engagement. So the main question that we asked had to do with how their families were involved in HIV treatment, and we included a number of probes to not only capture the positive roles, but also some of the challenges that families might pose on youth retention and adherence. To analyze data, we had a team of 3 who independently reviewed and coded all transcripts, and we used that thematic analysis with Atlas TI. So just to give you a little bit of demographic information about the participants. So the adolescents were between 13 and 18, and most of them were around 15 years old. Most of them were female, and they were in primary or high school. Their caregivers were around 42. All of them were female, and they identified as either the participating youth's mother, grandmother, or aunt. And most of them had completed at least high school. For stakeholders, they were similar in age to the caregivers, and almost 50% male and female. So this is just kind of a summary of why we decided to present the data only on the families, because as we were looking for those things that really were closest to retention and care and treatment adherence based on the adolescents and their caregivers' reports. And focusing on family barriers right now, the most frequently cited themes had to do with instability at home, lack of disclosure to family members, and the low HIV knowledge of family members. For family support, one of the things we wanted to do in this study was to tease apart social support. So often when we're looking at data, especially quantitative data, we look at global measures of support. But we were most interested in seeing, well, are there certain types of support that might be more closely aligned with retention and care and treatment adherence. So just to give you a little idea, the transcript reviews were in line with the four identified types of social support. So instrumental support has to do with tangible assistance or aid. Informational support, adolescents really relied on their families as primary sources of information about HIV. Appraisal. So that has to do with encouraging reflection or self-evaluation in terms of making decisions, and then emotional support. So here I have a quote from a caregiver who talked about the type of support that she provided the participating youth in this study, and really emphasizes the importance of planning ahead, especially to help youth to participate in studies, to help youth remember their pills. So she says, if we're going to go out, we are going to come and we're going to come back late. Everyone takes their pills with them. I've got small plastic sachets which I put the tablets in, so they just put their tablets into their pockets and the water bottle is always there. We have a ritual at home. Whoever's around me and hears the alarm going off at 2100 just goes to the area where the children are and screams out, time is 2100. You'll see the other children come into the house and take the tablet. So she mentioned several other things in this statement, but really talked about how this is a family affair. So everyone takes the pills together, and this is something that they started really early on. Informational support. So this is another quote from a caregiver who talked about the challenges of being the primary source of information about HIV, but specifically as it related to disclosing her daughter's HIV status to her daughter. She says, when she was about to be an adolescent, I was told to sit down with her and explain that she has this disease. Hey, it's hard for me. I sat her down and there was an advert on TV. I don't know what it was about, but it said condomize or whatever. And she liked that advert. She liked it because she's a child. She did not know what the advert even meant. So I sat down and explained to her, and she went on to talk about the types of questions that her child asked and the anxiety that it created having to disclose how she was infected and why. Appraisal support, again, has to do with encouraging self-evaluation and reflection. And in this context, parents often talked about really reminding their youth of their autonomy, the decision that they have over their treatment. So one caregiver says, I used to sit down with her when she did not want to take her treatment and ask her questions like, do you want to live? And she replied, yes. And then I'd say, if you want to live, you must take your treatment. But if you don't want to live, you will stop the treatment. So even though she really wants her child to take the treatment, she reminded her that ultimately this is your decision, but your decision regarding your treatment has consequences. Now these last few slides focus on families as sources of challenge, so some of the family barriers. And one of the ones that came up most frequently had to do with being in an unstable home environment or sometimes outright child neglect. And this is from a stakeholder who worked in social services. And she says, sometimes you think that the child just doesn't want to take treatment because she doesn't want to take the treatment. But if you dig into it, sometimes you find that socially, maybe the mother might be an alcoholic or there are some issues at home, or the child is being discriminated. So it has to do with looking at the overall context and not just the decision to take treatment or not. So that whole ecological approach. Another thing that was very frequent had to do with lack of disclosure to family members. So what we saw often in the transcripts is that often it was just the primary caregiver who was aware of the child's HIV status, and they identified this as a potential barrier to retention and care. One stakeholder said, sometimes you find out a person doesn't want to be known by the family, so she missed out on support. And then you find out the families want to help this person, but this person didn't want to be known by the family for quite a long time. So I think involving your family in and not judging them, thinking that they will talk badly about you, is critical. So she was talking specifically about several cases where adolescents who were behaviorally infected didn't necessarily want their family to know about their status. And it wasn't until they got really sick that they disclosed and then found that their family was supportive when they expected the opposite. So just a summary of key findings. I do want to say that overwhelmingly participants associated their families with positive roles. So they talked about the importance of emotional support, especially unconditional support. So adolescents themselves identified the fact that it was really important for parents or their families overall to support them even if they decided not to take their treatment. Family education, so making sure that caregivers and other family members involved with the youth are knowledgeable about HIV because, again, adolescents really refer to their family members most frequently to learn more about HIV and living positively. Establishments of rituals and planning ahead during travel and just basic reminders from family members were really important to treatment retention, especially adherence. And then some of the harms had to do with lack of structure at home, the issue of non-disclosure, and then rejection, so those times when family members aren't really supportive. So our next steps with this particular study, we found that for the most part, adolescents were really not open to disclosing their status to other family members who didn't already know. So even with this group, they especially need social support because if they're not disclosed to family, they're also reporting not disclosing to other people around them. So we've talked to them about their interest in peer support interventions and fictive kinship networks where they're connected with other youth living with HIV and they can support each other. So this is our next step in terms of looking into the importance of social networks. Just want to again acknowledge study participants. Research assistants are shown here, our funders, and our partners in this research. Thank you.
Thank you. The microphone is, the speaker is now open for questions. I may start off with one, which is I'm curious if there were differences observed between adolescents who were infected around childbirth versus those that may have acquired HIV during their adolescence. Have you had looked at that at all?
So there were so few who were behaviorally infected in our particular sample that we didn't. Most of the differences were very unique. Mm-hmm. But I will say that challenges with disclosure, so at least one person would know that the child is infected if they have a primary caregiver, but with those who are behaviorally infected, sometimes it's difficult for them to tell anyone outside of their provider.
Thank you. Microphone number 4.
Is it okay if I ask the gentleman from South Africa a question, because he wasn't, oh, thank you, okay.
That's fine, yeah.
This has to do with the adherence groups in South Africa. I was unclear what care they got in the adherence group versus the clinic, because, for example, they get screened regularly for STIs, TB, maybe viral load, but I'm guessing that didn't happen in the group. So I'm just trying to figure out what the group gave them in the way of care and services versus what they had to get in the facilities.
Okay. Thank you. Well, the care package that they receive at the club is the same one that they receive at the facility, except the collection of the bloods. So they get screened for STI at the club, they get screened for TB, nutrition, while they attend the club. So to make sure that when we pick up something that will warrant them to get an additional care, then they are referred to the facility that they are linked to to receive such management.
So the lab specimens get sent somewhere to get tested?
I beg your pardon?
Well, you said they collected specimen in the adherence club, but then those specimens go someplace else?
Yes.
Okay, great,
Yes.
thanks.
Microphone number 3.
Thank you very much. My name is Mohadi from South Africa. I just wanted to find out, in your presentation you talk a lot about, family support being quite important. What I wanted to know is what mechanisms have been put in place to be able to support the families, particularly because as one listens to when you talk about how the process goes and how some of the family or some of the patients react, or the guardians of those of children particularly. There's a lot of stigma that seem to be attached to how people react, and also the issue of disclosure. We do know that disclosure is very closely related to how much stigmatized one is, whether it's internal stigma or external stigma. So I'm just wondering, with these programs, how much of the stigma issues are addressed or are linked to the programs that are being run? I mean, the same with the adherence clubs. We do know that most of the time with adherence clubs, they are really sort of like attending to those people that are already adhering. But before you get to that, to be stable in your adherence, there should be a process that leads you to that. And I think it links to the lady's question, the link between the facility and the adherence club. But more importantly for me is, how do we ensure that there is that smooth flow?
Okay, why don't we address that question to Dr. Ridgewood? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. To start. Thank you.
Yes, I can say at this point, there aren't specific measures in place to support families outside of offering a session where they could disclose to their child their HIV status. That was really one of the points of this question, of this particular study, because when we went there and spoke to youth just informally, they just mentioned a lot of issues surrounding the family, and other times where they were just really strong sources of support. So for our next steps, we really want to have more open networks where it's not necessary. So I mentioned peer support, but we also want to have that open to adolescents to be able to select the individuals that they really would like to disclose to, or who would support them in other ways, but may not necessarily know about their HIV status, and encourage them if they want to disclose.
Why don't we take 2 more questions from microphone 3 and then 4, and then we can do any remaining questions at the podium. Thank you. Number 3.
Hi, my name is Roxana Hagigat with the University of Oxford, but also the Nzansiwako cohort of HIV-positive adolescents in the Eastern Cape of South Africa. So first of all, thank you for your presentation. And also I was wondering if you found any differences between older and younger adolescents, or between the boys and the girls, in terms of how they understood the role of their families, and also potentially the caregivers, if they noted any differences between those who are caregiving for boys and girls.
So for well, I'll start with females. For the most part, we didn't necessarily see a lot of difference in terms of their reports of familiar support or the importance of their families in treatment. Younger adolescents talked a little bit more about family support, whereas the older adolescents, there seemed to be more concerns with family and reaching out to friendship networks a little more than family.
All right, last question.
Yeah, thank you for the interesting presentation. You sort of touched on this earlier in the question, so I don't want to make you repeat yourself, but I'm wondering if you're aware of any parenting programs that really specifically work with the caregivers to overcome the issues that you identified and help them, work with them. And I know you mentioned there aren't any real supports in place where you are working, but if your literature review or any other work has shown other places that might have those kinds of parenting programs?
So there are a number of NGOs and community-based organizations in the community that have parent education type programs where they talk about issues with taking treatment, social support. Some of them even have support groups that include caregivers. So they're not necessarily evidence-based, but these are things that a lot of our stakeholders mentioned that they had as part of their organization. So one of the purposes of this study was to see what's happening in the community, and from adolescents' perspective and the caregivers, were they even aware of some of these supports? And what we found is a lot of them were not.
Thank you.
Great. Well, I'd like to thank all of the speakers today for excellent presentations and really interesting insights into how we retain patients into care, in care. I think today really highlighted a variety of creative approaches, really underlining that there's no single one-size-fit-all, of course, approach, but really thinking about how we work with communities, how we work with our patients, and really tailoring how we offer care to our different patient populations. So I apologize on behalf of my co-chair who had to leave early, but I want to thank all the speakers for great presentations. Thank you.